Today we're going to look at it was a question paper of the Olympiad, the second round. So what we'll do is we'll look at the question. There's also some of the things, some of the different types of adjustments for the same adjustment. I'll give you some examples as well. So we're not only going to do this question, we'll also look at some examples. Then next week, we will look at manufacturing and recons. And then the last week we'll look at cash flow and analysis maybe. All right. So let's look at this question. Remember, this is your normal question one. They can ask you either an income statement or a balance sheet or a combination. You always, before you start with the question, make sure that you know what they ask. Because we're going to do the whole question as a whole. We're not going to do with the income statement and then finish that and then go to the next part. We do the whole question. So we see, they say you are provided with information for the year ended 28 February. Complete the statement of comprehensive income. Complete the ordinary share capital note, the retained income note, and calculate the loan amount as in the financial statement, the one where they say it's for the non-current liabilities. All right. So let's look at the information. They give us the ordinary share capital. They give us the opening balance and the closing balance. So we can put the opening balance in, the 10,579. You will also see I completed my retained income note. I completed this, but remember, we don't always know whether it's first shares issued or first shares bought back. So that can change depending on the question. In this case, they gave us the opening balance of 8371,200. 8371,200. They gave us retained income, the opening balance, as well as the closing balance, the 461,520. 461,520. The loan, they gave us the opening balance 207,600. Trade creditors they gave us, we don't need that. SARS income tax they gave us. What do we do with SARS income tax if they give us a balance? I taught you. You always do your ledger account. Remember? Always ledger account. So I'm just going to do it here. So SARS, they say provisional payment, so that's our balance or bank on the debit side, 410,160. So always do your SARS account. We don't know why they gave us that figure, but you might need it. Then sales, there's a question mark. Cost of sales, they filled in 5827. Operating income they gave us 1055. Salaries and wages 601440. It was filled in. Audit fees 78480. Rent expense 95088. Directors fees 597360. Sundry expenses 110,016. Interest on fixed deposit is a question mark. Interest on loan, so our interest expense 291,000. All right, then we've finished with the first part. Now we don't actually have to go back to that page. Now we can carry on with the next part of the questions. Now they say sales of goods, the company maintains a markup of 40% on cost. Note that old goods costing 115,200 included in the cost of sales were sold at 10% below cost price. Now what do we want to calculate? We want to calculate the sales. So we split that one up. We split the cost of sales up. We have our cost of sales, which is 5827. 200. So that 5827 has two parts. The 115,200, the 115,200, we've sold at 10% less than the cost price. Am I right? So we sold that at 90% of the price. So that will give you 103,680. 103,680. The other part of the 5827, so if you get the difference, it's 5712. They say they normally sell their stock at a markup of 40%. So we will multiply that by 140%. Remember, we want a bigger figure, so we multiply by 140%. And that gives you 996,800. And if you add those two figures, you get 8,100,480. So 8,100,480. All right. So very important. You don't try to do that calculation on your calculator just by doing. Write down the difference between the two. The previous time I showed you, if I have, the other thing that they sometimes ask is, remember, they can say to you, you have a markup of 140%. So if your markup is 140%, a lot of learners still work with 140%. But then it's 100 plus the 140%. So then you work with 240%. All right, remember that. And I showed you last week, if your sales is 3,000 Rand and your cost of sales is 2,000 Rand, your gross profit is 1,000. If I give a discount to my customers, in other words, I sell my stuff for 2,500, does it change the cost of sales? No. So if they give you the sales and they say to you there was trade discount of 500 Rand, I took a huge amount now. If they say you have 500 Rand discount, you first add that to your selling price and then you calculate your cost price. All right, so you can't use the 2,500 for your cost of sales. So sometimes they give you the sales and then they say there was trade discount. So you first have to add that trade discount to get your original selling price and then calculate your cost of sales. All right, so that gives you a gross profit of 22,73280, 2,273,280. The audit fees, we know it by now. If you work through the last few papers, every time nearly there is this adjustment where they say 70% of the annual fees have been paid. What are we looking for? The 100%. Am I right? So your audit fees multiplied by 75% gave you the 78,480. So how do we get the 100%? We divide by 75%. So we just divide by 75%. And then that will give you 104,640. The other manner in which they ask this, they will say 25% of the audit fees is outstanding. So what do most learners do? They multiply by 25% and add that. So remember, this is not your total. So if they say 25% is outstanding, it means they only paid 75%. You still divide by 75%. All right. If they give you the full audit fees, if they say this is the full audit fees, 25% is outstanding, Then you will calculate the 25, but then they will ask the balance sheet. So there you will have the credits to get your accrued expense. Remember, we don't need the accrued expense in this question. Am I right? So we don't have to worry about what's the 100% and what's the accrued part. We just want the 100% for our income statement. Okay. Next one. They say the director's fees. Now remember the director's fees. Here, where do you start when you get I tried to look for something else. We'll see if we have time. Maybe we can look at that one as well. So normally they will say you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 directors, and this one gets this and that one gets that and this one did not receive that. So when you get a question like that, you always write down director 1, 2, 3, 4. And then they say 1 received 12 payments. He received all his fees. So number 1 got 12. Number 2 only got 10. So he got 10 payments. The other one got 13. So you multiply his by 13. The other one only got 7, multiplied by 7. Then you get the total amount that you've paid. So in this case, they say that the company has received 3 directors who earned the same fee. So if we have 3 directors, how many payments must we make in the year? 36. All right, so that's our starting point. 1 director was paid 2 months in advance. So how many did we pay? 38. All right. So we take our director's fees, that one 105532, the 597, sorry, 597,306, and now we see that was for 38 payments. So the 597,360 was for 38 payments. And that gives us a payment of, putting it down, $15,720. And that one guy, he received 2 months in advance. So we have to multiply by 2. And that's 31,440. So remember, if you calculate your director's fees and you get a decimal figure, you know you counted the months wrongly. All right. It will always work out on a round figure. So director's fees, we subtract 31,440. And that will give you 565,920. 565,920. The rent, a storeroom was rented from the 1st of June at 13,440 per month. Rent increased by 7.5% on 1 December. Provide for outstanding rent. So here's one where normally we would do the X calculation, the one that I showed you. Here it's not necessary. Why? They give us a monthly rent. All right. So when did we start, from when did we rent this place? From the 1st of June. And the rent increased on the 1st of December. So June, July, August, September, October, November. So for 6 months, our rent was 13,440. And from the 1st of December, our rent was had an increase of 7.5%. So for December, January and February, for 3 months, our rent was 13,440 multiplied by 107.5%. So the 6 times 1,3440 is 80,640. And the 3 months rent is 43344. And that gives us a total of 123,984. What did we calculate there? the total. So our rent, we can just write that figure in, 123,984. Do you agree? If they asked us the balance sheet, we would have calculated that we are still outstanding. The figure is 28,896. But they didn't ask the balance sheet, the creditors note, so we don't worry about that outstanding figure. All right. Just a simple example. If I say to you my rent is 10,000 rand a month, what should my rent be at the end of the year? 120,000. What did I do? Took the 10,000 times 12. So they gave you this figure. They said for 6 months we have this rent, and for 3 months our rent increases. So we can calculate the 9 months that we owed, that the rent was for. And then we don't need to worry about the accrued expense because we only want the 9 months. All right? Everybody happy with that one? I see a lot of frowns. You're fine? Okay. Then they say the loan. This one in the Olympiad, I marked question 1. There were very few learners that got this one right. Very few of those that I marked. Let's see what they say. They say we have fixed monthly repayments, including interest, worth 37,920. So what's the first thing we do? That's a monthly payment, so we must multiply by 12. So the 37,920 times 12 gives us 455,040. All right? So we must subtract that from our opening balance. 455,040. That is your 12 months payment. Then they say the interest was capitalized. So we saw that our interest expense was 291,000. It was capitalized. So what does that mean? It must be added to our loan. Remember, if you think back, this payment includes my loan and the interest. All right. So now we subtracted the interest from our loan, but the part of that was interest. That's why we have to add the interest again. All right. And now they say, what will happen next year? Next year, they give us the interest. And remember, this was a fixed payment for every year. We have this fixed payment. It carries on. It's like a home loan. What happens every year with your home loan? Every year, your interest becomes less and your capital portion becomes more. So next year, they will pay less interest, so they will pay off more of the loan. So they say next year the interest is 194,400. So of this 455,000, what is the loan part? We subtract that interest of 194,400. So we subtract, I'm just going to write that in brackets so that you get the figures, 455,040 minus the interest for next year, 194,400. And that equals 266,640. So the 207,600 minus 455,040 plus 291 minus 260,640, and that will give you 1645,920. All right. So the previous year, your interest was 291,000. Your payments stay the same. But this year, your interest is now 194. So that means you pay off a bigger part of your loan as your loan continues. So if you are in buy a home one day, for the first 10 years, if you buy a house for R1 million, your payment will be more or less 10,000 rand a month. After 10 years, you will still owe a million rand, more or less. Why? Interest. Interest is capitalized. So what happens? At the beginning, you pay interest on a bigger figure. Am I right? And as you carry on, that part that you pay at the beginning, nearly 10,000 of your 10,000 is interest. And as you carry on, that part of the interest becomes a little bit less because you pay a little bit off on your loan. So after about 10 years, you only actually start paying off your home. So you must start early. Work hard so that you can afford your home one day. All right. Everybody happy with the loan? Income tax. They say 37,560 rand is still due to SARS. What does that mean? Our SARS has a credit balance. Am I right? How much did we pay? We already paid him 410,000. And now they say we still owe him 37,560. So we have a balance. It's a credit balance. Sorry, so it looks like that. 37,560. So I can calculate my income tax. What do they normally give us? They give us a balance and they give us the income tax. And then you calculate your balance for the balance sheet. Here they gave the balance, so now we can calculate our income tax, which is 447,720. That's our income tax. So our income tax 447,720. Remember to put that in brackets. I think that was all right. So we are there. The correct net profit after tax, they filled that in, is 1,151,280. And then they say share capital and dividends. Authorized share capital is 1.92 million shares. On the 1st of March, 80% of the shares were in issue. So we have our capital. They say 80% were in issue. So that is 1,536, 1,536,000 shares at the beginning of the year. So what was my average price? If we take that 8,371,200 divided by 1,536, we get an average price of R5.45. It's always good to write that down. We have our closing balance, so we can also get that balancing figure, average price. So the 10,579,200 divided by 1,776 gives us an average price of 596, more or less. All right. Now, what do they say? They say on the 1st of March, 360 shares were repurchased. So we have 360,000 shares were repurchased, so we put it in brackets. We put it in brackets. They say it was purchased at 558,000 above the average price. So what do we do with the 558? It goes to my retained income. So we have 360,000 shares repurchased at 558,000. It was repurchased, so we put it in brackets. We can calculate the average price of that, or the price of that, 558 divided by 360 is R1.55. R1.55 was the average price, above the average price. Then they say on the 31st of August, interim dividends were paid of 30 cents. So our interim, so the first thing we write down is the 30 cents. Always write that down first. Now, for how many shares did get that interim dividend? How many shares would receive that interim dividend? It would be the 1,536 minus the 360. Am I right? because that was repurchased on the 1st of May and we are already in August. So they won't get the dividends. So that will be for 1,176,000. And that will give you 352,800. $352,800. And then they say additional shares were issued. That's all. So they say shares, was bought back. And shares were issued. So they gave us the figure for the price above the average shares. So what do we know if our bought back happened first before the issue of shares? What do we know? It will also be R5.45. All right, so the R5.45 you will use here. If it was first issued and then bought back, then you would use the R5.96. Okay, so that shares bought back, the 360,000, will be 1962. And it's in brackets. 1962 in brackets. So now we can calculate the additional shares. So we will say 1776 plus 360 minus 1536. So that is 600,000 shares that were issued. And this one, the 10 plus 1962 minus 8371 will give you 4170. And that is then your balancing figure. That's your balancing figure. So now we only have to do our final dividend. They say final dividends were declared, but they don't give us anything. So we know we have our net profit after tax, 1151,280. So we only need that figure, am I right? So we can work from the bottom, 461 plus 558 minus 115 minus 451, and you get a minus 583,680. And the 583 minus the 352 gives you then a final dividend of 230,880. So that is also a balancing figure. In the cash flow statement, they can give you all the figures except maybe that one, because you need your net profit before tax. So then you will do, if they give you the information, if they don't give you the net profit before tax, you will always have to do your retained income note, right, in cash flow. Sometimes that happens. Now we can finish our income statement. So our gross income is 3328. 608. Our sundry expenses didn't change, the 110,016. So that gives us 1506. 1506. So the 3328 minus 1506 gives us an operating profit of 1,822,608. Our interest expense, we have 291. So now we can't get our interest income, we can't get that one, so we have to work from the bottom upwards. So we remember 1151 plus 447 gives you 1599 plus 291 gives you 1890. And now the difference between those two figures is 67392. Okay. So what sometimes happens, now this was your balancing figure. Sometimes you make a mistake. And now you get here, you get 1,950,000. So what happens now? Now this figure is bigger than this one, and it's supposed to be smaller. If that happens in the exam, you still get the difference between the two, but then you put it in brackets. So even though your interest shows a negative figure, which is actually wrong, you will get the marks because it's a balancing figure. All right. The same year, sometimes they will give sundry expenses as a balancing figure. And now you get this total and you add this up and it's more than that total. Then you put it in brackets. Some learners, they don't put it in brackets. So what do the examiner now do? The examiner says this plus that is that. And it's not that, then you won't get the mark. But if you put it in brackets, you will get the mark, even though it is in brackets. All right. Any questions on this question? Are you fine? All right. Let's look. I just got another example of sales and cost of sales. So sometimes the following, let's just give you this. I'm going to just wipe this out. In this question, they said that your sales is 2,1. They gave such big figures, my calculator struggled to do this. 200, that was your sales. Then they said the markup is 120%. So quickly write that down. The markup is 120%. So your sales, 21,017,200. Your markup is 120%. Trade discount was 336,000. Trade discount was 336,000. Quickly calculate the cost of sales. So our sales, 21,017,200. The markup, 120%. And the trade discount, 336,000. Who has an answer? Yes? He gets 9,706,000. Who agrees with him? Who disagrees? So remember, what did we say? If there's trade discount, we add it to the sales. Am I right? So we will say for our cost of sales, we will say 017,200 plus the 336,000. And now the markup is 120%, so we divide by 220%. All right, and then you get 9,706. So that will be your cost of sales. So if they give you the cost of sales, you multiply by 220%, then you will get the whole figure of the total of that one. And then you subtract the 336, right? All right? So that's the sales. So if you now get that, you must get it right. Right. The one thing I also wanted to show you, again, just a little reminder, we did that. Sometimes they give us a percentage. They will say the net profit is 28%. So that is 28%. This one is 100%, and this one is 72%. All right. So we know this is 72% of that. That one is 28% of that. So we can say 1150 51280 divided by 72%. And then we get that 1599. And then the difference is just multiplied by 28 or get the difference between the two, which was 447720. So remember, if they give you that one, you multiply by 28. If they give you this one, you divide by 28. If they give you that one, you divide by 72%. And then you will always get it right. And I see a lot of learners, remember in the end of the year, if you don't put something in brackets, they will mark it right if you subtracted it. But don't make it difficult for the markers. Put in your brackets where they are supposed to be brackets. Don't leave the brackets. Even the shares, you put in your brackets. If there's repurchase, you put in your brackets. In your retained income, the dividends and the shares bought back, put it in brackets. It makes it easier for the marker. I can tell you a lot of markers, they struggle to do this if you did not put it in brackets, especially if you have to work backwards. They struggle to mark. Then they mark it wrong because they don't use their calculators. You don't have time if you have to mark 7,000 scripts to check the calculations. So they just check. And if they cannot easily see what you did, they mark it wrong. So use your brackets where there's supposed. They never worry about that. The only question, cash flow. If your brackets is wrong there, you won't get the marks. All right? But in the income statement, if you have brackets, you did not use the brackets, but you did subtract the figure, you will get the marks. But make it easy for the markers by using your brackets. All right? Any question? Everybody happy? All right. Then next week will be Ms. Wessels. She will help you with, I'm not here next week. And then the last week we'll do cash flow and maybe an analysis or balance sheet or something like that. All right.